Welcome to ACCA FA of Financial Accounting paper. Now, you may be new to accounting, so I would say that financial accounting is very interesting because it will build you core skills that you can use in the future in the business, or you start up your own firm providing accounting services to other organizations. So therefore, we need to study the financial accounting in much more detail there. First of all, the syllabus has been divided into these parts. First, let's look at the context and purpose of financial reporting. Now that means, why do we need to prepare financial statement? So financial statement will show quite a lot of things in a business, or they are short for FS, or financial statements, if you like, or we can call it as financial reporting. Now, the financial statements will show the amount of assets that the business owns. So, for example, the computers, land and buildings. The liabilities the business is owed to. So, for example, the amount of money that the business owed to the bank. And also we use the asset minus liabilities. So for example, I've got cash of $100, which means my asset, and I owe 80 to the bank. And therefore the remaining $20 will be belonging to me, or belonging to the business, or we can call it as equity. And the financial statements will also show the income and expense that the business has. But why do we need to prepare the financial statement? Well, most likely that we need to pay tax. And also, we are showing these to the shareholders. To be accountable to the shareholders or the boss of the company, and therefore we need to demonstrate to them how much money that I made during the year. And that's what I mean by the context and purpose of financial reporting. It's very important that you bear that in mind, that interpretation will also be tested in the exam. So in other words, you may be given a set of financial statement and you are required to interpret the financial statement. So for example, calculating different ratios and to tell the examiner whether or not the business performance has improved during the year. The next things that we need to look at is how do we prepare the financial statement. So for example, using double entry. Now entry means that we take the source document or the business document, for example, the contract, the invoice, and we take these documents and see the numbers in there, and we enter the number into the system. And this is what I mean by entry, which means we simply enter the number into the accounting system. So nowadays, the accounting system will be the e-system, okay? It's the internet-based system, and we enter into the computer. However, what do I mean by double? Double means to check, okay? Not just for the first time, but double check that, okay? So which means we introduce the accounting language, which means debit and credit, which means DR and CR. So this is what I mean by double entry, because every transaction, not only do they have a debit entry, but they also have a credit entry. The reason why this will be a case is because later on, for every debit side, we've got a corresponding credit side, and so we can double check that to confirm its accuracy. Okay, so that's what I mean by double entry. Now, after we learned the double entry, okay, bookkeeping if you like, the next thing is related to accounting principles, concept, and qualitative characteristics. Firstly, the accounting principles. So usually the financial controller or the finance director in the business will set the overall accounting principle. So for example, determining the policy that we need to adopt in the business when we are making double entries. So for example, we will be deciding when to recognize the income, when to recognize the expense, and by how much, and so on. So these are the principles adopted by the business. It will be different from entities to entities. And then we'll be looking at the concepts and qualitative characteristics when we are preparing the financial statement there. So for example, when we are preparing the financial statement, we have to ensure that the information or the data that we input the system will be reasonably appropriate. And of course, according to the qualitative characteristics, we use another terminology called faithful representation. Okay, so faithful representation is to make sure that the data or information that we input into the system will be reasonably appropriate. And of course, there will be detailed requirements there as well when we come to the actual course. The next area in the syllabus is to record different transactions and events. So in other words, the transactions will be related to the income, okay, so we sell something, so we recognize the revenue. And also the expenses, okay, so we pay for something, and this is why we need to recognize these expenses. So these are what I mean by transactions. How about for event? So event related to assets, related to liabilities that I told you before, related to possibly equity. So these are the events that we need to care about, how to record them using a double entry. Again, double entry, we've got a debit and a credit side. So we will learn quite a lot of things here. So for example, how we're going to be recording the inventory, property, plant, equipment, provisions, liabilities, and so on. The next area after this will be to prepare a trial balance. A trial balance simply means before we finally prepare for the financial statement, we have to ensure all the debit sides will be equal to the credit side. So what we tend to do is going to list all the balances here and to make sure the total of the debit side equals to the total of the credit side. So you have to make sure they are ready for that. And of course, we need to be aware of the reconciliations as well. So what do I mean by reconciliations? Well, for the business, they have to reconcile their records with the record from the external source. So what do I mean by this? Would be this. Suppose that you think that you've owed $100 to the seller or the supplier, if you like. However, from the supplier's point of view, they think that you owe them $120. And therefore, we need to adjust the difference worth of $20 from this process. And this is what I mean by the reconciliation. Okay? So in terms of the FA syllabus point of view, there would be 3 reconciliations that we need to care about. First of all, would be the receivables reconciliations with regards to customers. Second, the payables reconciliations related to seller or suppliers. And third, the bank reconciliations with regards to bank. Of course, another area of the reconciliation will be to adjust for accounting errors. Of course, when we are making double entries, it is highly likely that human mistakes may be built in. And this is why accounting errors existed. And therefore, we need to adjust for them. So after we prepared all these bits and pieces, we reconciled the work and we corrected all the accounting errors. We ensured that the balance has been balanced. Okay, so each element, okay, so for example, for income, expense, assets, liabilities, each element when putting them into a trial balance alongside with the corrected errors, all of the elements, the total debit side will be equals to the credit side. So from this point, we can then prepare for the financial statement, okay? So including quite a lot of financial statements really. Mainly there will be 4 financial statements that we need to care about. So for example, the SFP, or the statement of financial position, showing the amount of assets, liabilities and equity in a business. Second is the P&L, if you like, which means the statement, which means a piece of paper, statements of profit or loss, okay, whether or not you make profit or you suffer from losses. And then we'll be preparing for the statement of cash flows, which means the cash flows changes during the year. And finally, the statement of changes in equity, showing the movement of equity. So for example, whether or not the company in the year has paid out dividend, has issued additional shares. Okay, so we put them there. Of course, from the exam's point of view, we need to know that financial statements also includes the note. Will be a set of narratives, okay, telling the shareholders why we put these figures in and how do we calculate those figures. Now, the final part in the FA syllabus is with regards to consolidation. So consolidation simply means we prepare for the group account. So what do I mean by group account? So for example, within a group, we've got several companies in there. And we simply plus all the companies' assets, liabilities, income, expense all together. Of course, there would be other adjustments that we need to make as well. Okay, we'll detail that when we come to the course. Now, I would say the syllabus in the FA will be quite interesting, but how about for the exam? This exam is 120 minutes, which means 2 hours exam. 100 marks in total, 50 will be the passing mark. So for example, if a student has scored 49, 48, the student failed the paper. However, if the student scored 50, passing the paper. Now, the exam has been divided into 2 sections. Section A with 35 multiple choice questions. They could be asking you to select one answer or 2 answers, okay, or clicking on true or false, okay, inserting numbers, but you're not required to insert words, okay, insert narrative is not required by the FA. So 35 times by 2 marks each equals to 70 marks in total for the section A. How about for section B? Divided into 2 questions. So basically, there are 3 types of questions in the section B that may be tested. First of all, to prepare for the financial statement from the trial balance. Second, prepare the statement of cash flows separately. Third is to prepare the consolidated financial statement. Okay, it's the group account. Of course, the interpretation may come in a section B as well. So each of the section B question will be worth at 15 marks, so 30 in total. So total at 100 marks. So I would say that in the section A, there will be no partial mark. So for example, if the examiner asks you to choose 2 options, if you choose one correctly but wrong on the other, you will get no marks in that question. However, there would be partial mark in the section B question. So for example, using the same scenario, you're given the multiple choice question in section B, and then asking you to select 2 options. You select one correctly, but wrong on the other, so you will get 1 mark out of 2 for the option that you correctly picked up. Okay, so make sure that you're ready for that. So time management is very key. I must say that FA quite useful and interesting. I can't wait to see you in my course. Bye for now and good luck with your studies then.
APC, accounting for your future.